Good morning, everybody, and welcome to today's webinar on effective tyre management, how to turn black into gold. I'm Paul Wilkes, the Forza Business Services Manager, and I'm delighted to say that I'm joined today by David Young and Matt Neal from Michelin, who I'll hand over to in a minute. This webinar is part of our monthly series where we introduce you to one of our associates who will share some of their knowledge and insights about best practice to help you run your fleets, as well as some of the offers and discounts that are available to you. So while I've got you here, I'll take this opportunity to remind you all about our associates. Now, Forza Associates are companies who offer discounted products or services to Forza operators, and you can see here a list of all of the types of areas that they cover and the different types of offerings that are available to you. And you can find these offers and discounts from our more than 150 Forza Associates by going to your members dashboard and then clicking on Browse Products and Offers. And as you can see here on the right-hand side. So that's my bit done, nice and quick. I just need to say that in the usual fashion, if you've got any questions during the presentation, then please use the question chat box on the right-hand side of your screen, and we'll take some time at the end to answer any of your questions. And I'll now hand over to David and Matt to introduce themselves and to take you through the main presentation. Over to you.
Thank you, Paul. Okay, so our presentation, Turning Black to Gold. Next slide, please. So just to introduce ourselves, my name is David Young. I'm a key account manager for Michelin Services and Solutions. Worked with Michelin for 25 years plus now. Started off as a regional sales representative in the Suffolk/East Anglia area, and now looking at services and solutions which deal with a lot of the large fleets and mileage contract type division.
Morning, everybody. I'm Matt Neal. I'm also a key account manager for Michelin Services and Solutions. I've been with Michelin for 24 years, various roles, but the last 12 years as a key account manager. So you've got a combined total of 49 years worth of experience between the two of us then, Dave. Okay, so today we're going to talk you through tyre management, the implications that it can have on financial savings, compliance, and also on the environment as well. Next slide, please. So we're going to go now and start at the basics, which is choosing the right tyre for your operation, which actually might sound really simple, but it can affect so many different areas of your business. So it's a really good starting point for good tyre management. So if we look across the top, first of all, so number one, you've got to consider in truck, first of all, we'll move on to van in a moment, but in truck, first of all, you've got to consider the type of operation that you're running. So if you've got more than 80% of your time are on main roads and main routes and highways, or is less than 80% of your time spent on those main routes and highways. And as you get into this area, it may be that you start to do a little bit of off-road activity. And that moves right across to the right-hand side, where sometimes or often you may be on construction sites. And each of these types of operation will start to determine the route that you go down in your thinking when it comes to tyre choice. If you are spending more than 80% of your time on main routes, then the point two here is that you may want to consider how many drops a day are you making. Is it less than 3 or is it more than 3? Because that could also help to determine tyre choice in terms of whether you're more straight line running or whether you're doing more stop-start operation. And then point number 3 underneath is, what is your main priority as a business? So once you've boiled down to what your operation type is it mileage and mileage savings over your tyres more important to you, or is actually the fuel savings, the CO2 emissions, and that element of tyre husbandry good important to you? In terms of van, when you look at van choice, you've got choices of whether you're looking at summer tyres for van, which would obviously give you a lower rolling resistance, whether you're looking at winter tyres, or whether you were looking at an all-season tyre, which would give you better uptime right the way across all times of the year. Each of these, depending on your operation, will give benefits. They could give benefits of less damage, which means less downtime, better performance, and also could be better for the environment. And each of those elements start you off on the road to optimize total cost of ownership. I'm now going to hand over to Dave Young for the next few slides.
Thank you, Matt. Next slide, please. So what we want to talk about now is the multi-life approach, which is the first part when we look at the route from gold to black. So when we look at a multi-life policy with any operation, this is more focused on the 7.5 ton vehicles and above. We would look at the potential 4 lives within Michelin, and what that looks like is it looks at a new tyre being fitted. When you buy that new tyre, potentially we built that tyre with the regroove depth in mind. Now you can see that when we look at life 2, this is where we regroove a new tyre, and we'll talk a bit more depth in regroove and the benefits of regroove. But there's a small cost to regrooving, but the benefits are great with an additional 25% potential mileage, not to mention some of the other savings, which we will talk about. Once your tyre has been regrooved, you then have the opportunity to send that back in as a casing. That casing can be then remanufactured into in this case, a Michelin remix if it's a Michelin new tyre. That has the benefits of costing you a lot less than the new because it's a lot of the raw materials are already there. Because we build at the same specifications as new, you also get the benefit of 100% of the performance of a remix as you do a new. And because it's built the same specification new, you get the benefit of a 4th life, which again is another regroove. But we'll talk in a bit more detail about the benefits of regrooving and the benefits of retreading stroke remix in a multi-life policy. Next slide, please. So if we look in depth at regrooving and retreading, when we look at regrooving, some of the benefits are great on regrooving. When a tyre gets down to between 4 and 2 millimeters remaining tread depth, what we'd recommend is that it is regrooved to a recommended pattern, which is as per a manufacturer's guidance. So there'll be a guidance issued on what that regroove pattern needs to look like. Regrooving a new or a remix tyre will give you circa 25% additional performance in mileage. What that also does is, from a raw material perspective, by regrooving 4 tyres, what you actually do is you save yourself 1 brand new tyre. Now, the average weight of a new tyre is 70 kilograms. So for every 4 tyres that you regroove, you're saving the raw material of a new tyre, but you're also saving the potential cost of a new tyre. So again, another avenue to some huge savings when it comes to regrooving. The graph that you can see in the middle there looks at a typical tyre. Top middle, you can see the underlayer rubber there in blue, which is potentially the regroove, but you can see there's more rubber underneath that where you get to the plies, which are the dotted line, which are your steel plies. Tyres are made to be regrooved. When a tyre is regrooved, there's nothing more fuel efficient than a regrooved tyre, because this is when it is its lowest rolling resistance. So we talk about a full vehicle fitted with regrooves over new tyres. There's a potential fuel saving there of 2 litres per 100 kilometres. So some huge savings to be gained by regrooving your tyres in fuel. So in summary, I mean, what we're looking at with regrooving is that we're going to generate a significant advantage for operators. There's an increased savings with less tyre purchases, an improvement in fuel economy, enhanced safety, and also whilst caring for the environment. Next slide, please. So if we now move on to the retreading part of a multi-life policy, we operate remix, but again, we also operate the encore and the retreads that are in the market. We've got some key facts there that when you look at the supermarkets, 70% of all their vehicles are equipped with retreads. There's a huge amount of commercial buses out there with retreads fitted today. We look at 85% of worn out tyres will be reused for retreading. So when you look at that, there's a potential there for some massive savings. And 95% of them are actually built in the UK and used in the UK. So Michelin have a factory in Stoke-on-Trent, and we produce a lot of our retreads remix in our factory in Stoke-on-Trent. So if we look at some of the value return that we get from this, By retreading your tyres or by remixing your tyres, you get double the lifespan of the casing. We've already talked about the potential savings in natural resources. So when you look at the potential savings in raw materials, we can save up to 50 kilograms of rubber per tyre. So for every 100 remixes that we actually supply, there's a potential there in savings of nearly 5 tons of raw materials, which again adds to the amount of CO2 release into the atmosphere. So huge savings financially, huge savings from a CO2 perspective, and a huge saving from natural rubber as well. Next slide, please. So now we want to do is move on to tyre management. So this is looking at really an effective tyre management, and where that starts is with the tyre pressure that you put into your tyres. Now, an insufficient tyre pressure will increase your cost. Now, how does it do that? Well, running inappropriate tyre pressures is likely to have a detrimental effect to the actual footprint of the tread on the ground. So what we can see from some of the numbers here is that a fleet with 10% under inflation can potentially increase your fuel costs by up to 1.1%. Now, again, just by a little bit of air, that is a massive potential savings that you can have to your fleet when it comes to fuel. As we discussed, the tyre, if it is running with under inflation, it can affect the footprint of the tyre on the ground, so you get wear on the shoulder area. That can have a knock-on effect to the premature removal of your tyre, and we talk about a tyre which is 10% underinflated can be removed up to 7% early. So again, increase in the number of tyres that you purchase, so an increase in your potential cost just by a little bit of air in there. What other benefits does it have when we look at correct tyre pressure management? Well, because we look at normal pressure for load in the vehicle, we can witness a better grip because we've got more of the tyre on the ground, better steering responsiveness, again, more of the tyre on the ground, and a shorter braking distance, and again, purely because we've got more of a footprint of that tyre on the ground. A tyre which is running at the correct pressure also can be more damage resistant, and if we get that all together, we're looking at less tyre related breakdowns. And when we look at a breakdown on the side of the road, there's a huge cost involved in that, not only in the tyre, not only the breakdown, but possibly some inconsequential losses involved there as well. Next slide, please. The next part of an effective tyre management solution is looking at fleet inspections. So fleet inspections can take a number of forms. They can either be electronic inspections done by a PDA and a Bluetooth digital tread depth gauge, or they could be in a manual form, so done in a written format. What you can see on the slide here is a digital inspection which has been done. What that does is it gives you information on a regular basis of your vehicle. It gives you information of the tread depths of the tyres on your vehicle, the makes on your vehicle, whether those tyres have been re-grooved, whether those tyres have been retreaded, but most importantly, it helps you create an action list based on your tyre policy, which Matt will talk about a little bit later on what you actually physically want doing to proactively manage those tyres. So when we talk about compliance, it gives you a record of the tyres, and you can look at policy limits, and your policy limit might be 2-3 millimeters. It gives you the ability to look at tyre husbandry. So one of the actions may be that you want to re-groove and swap a tyre. You may want to turn a tyre on a rim. You've got your re-groove opportunities, so we can identify the tyres at 3 millimeters and identify them as an action to be re-grooved. Again, we've talked about the benefits of re-grooving, but the fleet inspection will allow you to actually maximise that potential. All that put together, it allows you to really maximise the life of your tyres, which means less tyres fitted and a more sustainable tyre policy with those tyres fitted. Next slide, please. Over to you, Matt.
Okay, thanks, Dave. So what we've talked about so far is quite a lot of, in the bottom right-hand side is the product use and services, which can account for up to 96% of the life cycle impacts of the tyre. In terms of other things that we need to think about, and what's becoming really important now, is your tyres that can no longer be used, so that at the end of their life is understanding what actually happens to them. So at end of life, is it the fact that they're going back for energy recovery, using the residual energy in the tyre, or are they materials being recycled for uses in other items, but maximizing the tyre even at the end of its life, so that we're reducing, reusing, renewing and recycling all the way through the life cycle of the tyre. Okay, next slide please. Okay, so this is where we start to bring all the different parts of the puzzle together that we've been talking about this morning, to ensure that the policy that you have is as efficient as possible. So you can see here the headings on on each of the parts of the puzzle. What we've talked about, thinking about service actions, tyre choice, thinking about tyre pressures and what they should be, and also inspections. So we've talked quite a bit about that this morning. But actually on the next slide, what you'll see is that a tyre policy doesn't actually have to be a complicated thing. So if we can move on to the next slide, please. Thanks. So in this example, if you look at the example, what you've got the heading of the vehicle type in yellow, so tractor units, trailers and vans here. If we just take the top area in dark blue, you've got the configuration. So what type of configuration is it? What tyre size is it? Moving to the right hand side, then the next two sections, you've got pressures, which are bi-axle type. So is it a steer drive, lift axle or a carry axle? And what are the recommended pressures? And then you move on to the bit that's relevant to what we've been talking about as well this morning, which is what your actual policy is going to be bi-axle. So if you took that top example of a 4x2 tractor unit and you took the steer axle example there, you're looking at part worn stock being your first choice item. But then if part worn stock is not available, you're looking at a new tyre being your available item. And obviously, once you start moving on to things like drive axles and to trailers, this is where things like your regrooving and your retreading are going to come into play. On the right hand side, you've got notes, and in that notes section could be where you put your preferred patterns if you have preferred patterns that you've chosen, and if there's any other stipulations where, for example, you may not want to regroove on the front axle, you'd stipulate that in here. So it really doesn't need to be that complicated at all. If we move on to the next slide, please. So in summary, what we've said is tyres, in general, they'll account for around about 2% of the yearly costs of running a fleet. However, they impact so many other different areas within the business. So we've talked about today tyre rolling resistance contributing up to 30% of your fuel costs. And fuel would be probably your second biggest spend in your business after people. Moving round on the chart here, fleet operating at 10% underinflated can increase your fuel costs by up to 1.1%. We've talked to you about that. We've talked also about underinflation costing more money through premature removal of tyres, up to 7%. And also in terms of underinflation and poor husbandry can actually lead to increased number of breakdowns. An industry cost of one breakdown when you put everything together of about £1,000. So the point here is that actually managing your tyres, having a clear policy, actually has a really positive effect in all of these areas and gives you the potential to turn black into gold. Next slide, please. Okay, so we have a Forza members offer where you can buy 4 Michelin 22.5-inch tyres and get a Michelin smartwatch. As always, terms and conditions apply. You can claim online in 3 easy steps, as you can see here on the slide. And what I'd also say is if you need any assistance with this or anything else that you've seen today, please email b2binquiries.uk@michelin.com. Okay, I think we're now on to the question area.
Thanks, David and Matt. That was very interesting presentation. So some good stuff in there. And I was very remiss and should have mentioned earlier that we're also joined by Steve Chadwick, who's the brand manager at Michelin as well, who I think has been nominated to answer any of the really difficult questions. Is that right, Steve?
It seems that way, Paul. Yeah.
Yeah, splendid, splendid. So we do have a question from the floor already from Katie Blows. Can you put a new tread on a casing if the tyre has been used in the waste industry? They've recently asked their tyre provider and they claim that they're not able to do it due to the potential damage caused by being used in that industry.
Okay, so the thing is that for any retread process, there's rigorous processes that case will have to go through to be accepted for retread. Obviously, Michelin have their own process when it comes to a remix tyre. And in general terms, we would say that you can absolutely retread. Certainly for our tyres, you can retread in that kind of industry, as long as the casing meets the needs, requirements to make sure that retread that comes out is robust and offers all the benefits that a Michelin tyre can offer. I don't know if you guys have got anything to add to that.
I'd absolutely agree. Quality control is key, and as you say, we certainly have a great deal of quality control through our whole retread process, whether that be on the remix or the encore side. There's a detailed process that every tyre return will go through to ensure it's ready for the remix process, and that ensures two things. One, that anybody that wants a multi-life policy that Dave explained earlier will be able to get one irrespective of vocation. And the other thing it ensures is it maintains that quality of product in any remix that are manufactured from our sites as well.
Yeah, and I suppose it's worth mentioning that we have a lot of waste fleets that we manage today, and all of those waste fleets will use remix stroke retreaded tyres in their operation.
So if it is, whoever's asked the question there, feel free to have a chat with your local tyre provider, service provider. If you've got a local Michelin account manager, or if not, fire an email across to the address that Matt provided there, and we'll be happy to have a chat with you about it.
Sounds good, thank you. And what's the panel's view on tyre sealants like ocky slime, etc.?
Okay, so in terms of things that go inside the tyre, considerations would have to be, in fact, the point we've just been talking about, is it going to affect things like casing acceptance for retread, for example? If things like that can't be washed out or can't be got out of the inside of the tread, is it going to affect casing acceptances and things like that? And the other thing is, I mean, I know that those things obviously go on in certain industries, but it can make actually things like an underinflated tyre quite difficult to spot. So, you could then be running in an underinflated condition for a prolonged period of time, which could then lead to other incidences. I don't know if you guys got anything to add to that.
No, not on that one, Matt.
I think that's really clear, Matt. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Do you have or promote any tyre management software that not only notes the pressures, but that can follow the life of a vehicle and all tyre changes? This would help to monitor the lifespan of different brands or patterns. I don't know if that's actually one for us is different, but is there anything that you're aware of that does that?
Dave, I think you're probably our expert on connected fleets and potential solutions to maybe give us a start on that one.
Nothing externally, but what we do have is we have a management database that we use on our own mileage contract type fleets, which does manage tyres on, tyres off, but that is more for our managed fleets. We have solutions when it comes to tyre pressure management. So we have TPMS solutions which will track the vehicle, it will track the pressures, and we can use that in conjunction with some of the management information that we have. Certainly, we have our own called Effie Trailer, which is a tyre pressure management trailer solution that we operate. And yeah, we have a number of things at our disposal that can help us do that, but not a tool I don't believe that we can supply to somebody to use from a management perspective.
Okay, But yeah, that's fine. Another question here. I've always wondered, can you complete any small repairs on tyres yourselves? For example, can small cuts be filled?
Okay, I mean, in terms of repairs on tyres, they have to meet the British standard when they're doing that. So I would always say, if you're going to repair a tyre, it should always be done by an authorised repairer. Okay, because anybody that's actually carrying out a repair on a tyre is basically saying, once they've repaired it, it's capable of carrying on in its same type of use, in its same conditions of use, at its right pressures, with it, and it won't fail. So I would always urge people, either if they've got a workshop situation, to make sure that the staff are trained properly to repair tyres in line with the British standard, or alternatively to use a professional outside the business.
Yeah, sound advice. There are a couple of questions that I will merge into one, I think. So what's your thoughts on tyre fill, and does 10% overinflation have similar cost implications to 10% underinflation?
Do you want to take this one, Dave?
Yeah, that's fine. Well, underinflation certainly has an impact on rolling resistance, has an impact on the tyre life. Overinflation can also have an impact on the tyre life. So what you get with underinflation is, in essence, you are running on the footprint that is the shoulders of the tyre, where with overinflation, you're more or less running on the tyre. So you haven't in the middle of the tyre. So you haven't got a full footprint on the ground. So yes, it has an implication on the premature removal of tyres. It will have an impact on certainly safety as well, because you haven't got that maximum footprint on the ground. Reference fuel efficiency, again, we need to look at that, but the argument could be an overinflated tyre, maybe a bit better on fuel economy, but ultimately you've got to weigh up the safety side and the tyre life side as well. But we certainly wouldn't recommend overinflating your tyres.
That sounds good. Sounds good. And do you have any sample tyre policies that could be circulated, or if people were to request them from you? Is that sort of thing you'd share?
I think the thing.
I was going to say, Matt, we're happy to share the information within the slides today, and the tyre policy which Matt showed is a really good example of a policy that will be used within a managed fleet. So yeah, hopefully that should answer. Once you've got the opportunity to see it a little bit closer, it should give you the answers that you need, I think.
The only other thing I'd add to that is, if anybody already has a Michelin contact that calls in on them on a regular basis, they would also be a really good port of call to talk to about a tyre policy.
Excellent. I've got a question here which I think will be for me to answer. It's, how do you best evidence tyre management for Forza Silver? I'm assuming you're going to look blankly at me when I say that. But yeah, so tyre management isn't a requirement at Silver, but it is a requirement at Bronze. So we'd be looking for a tyre management policy within that, which should include things like your tyre selection and considering your vehicle type and operating conditions, and making and demonstrating how you're monitoring the tyre usage for trends in wear, damage and age, that sort of thing. And also we look at disposal policy within that as well. So making sure that you are taking tyres to an approved disposal organisation, so that they are being disposed of ethically and not just skipped somewhere. So that's what we look for at Silver. We've got another question in. With the new 10-year tyre rule, will you be putting the manufacture date on both sides of the tyre?
Okay,
Steve?
so
Go on, Matt, you started.
I mean, obviously we do have the dot code on the tyre today, but whether we're planning to change the mould at all to include that on both sides, I'm not really sure.
I think not in the short term. No, there's no plans to change the overall view of the sidewall markings.
Okay, thank you for that. So that looks like, I think I've covered all of the questions that are in there. So thank you for that. Thank you for everybody. So I'll pull the webinar to a close now. Just to make sure there are no further questions. No, we're good. Oh, no, apparently I've missed one. Are you aware of tyre pressure indicators and do you recommend them? Sorry, Dean, I think hopefully that's covered your question.
Tyre pressure indicators.
Tyre pressure indicators, yeah, and do you recommend them?
Well, I guess the fact that I'm being very quiet about it, I don't know too much about tyre pressure indicators as such. I mean, obviously Dave's covered a bit on TPMS earlier and stuff like that. But if we're talking anything different to that, I'm not widely aware of wide use of anything else, which means that we neither don't recommend it or recommend it. We're sort of
so something that you put in to test the pressure, so like a handheld one that you might have to regularly check the pressure of the tyre.
I think that we're probably talking about a TPMS system there in reality, and in which case we would highly recommend regular monitoring of tyre pressures. The benefits that Matt and Dave have outlined in terms of overall tyre longevity, the safety, the compliance side, as well as the financial benefits to yourselves on fuel economy are definitely worth following. So absolutely look at those, and again, feel free to drop us an email, talk to your local Michelin representative, or access the Michelin website, which is business.michelin.co.uk as well, where there's a little bit more information around all the topics that are being covered by Dave and Matt as well.
Yeah, I think it's important to note as well, if we're talking about tyre pressure management or tyre pressure sensors, that they also give you the ability to potentially identify slow punches, therefore avoid roadside incidents, which again improves your uptime and ultimately the safety of your driver, because the last thing anybody wants is drivers at the side of the road.
Okay, thank you, everybody. So I'll say thank you to our panel and to all of our audience for joining us today. Keep an eye out for our next month's webinar, which is going to be on the 23rd of June, and it'll be on fleet management systems. And at the end of the webinar, you'll automatically receive a feedback survey. And I'd ask that you please spend a couple of minutes giving us your feedback, as we use your comments to improve all of our future events. So thank you all for your time this morning, and goodbye. I'll bring the webinar to a close. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you,
everybody. Goodbye.
Thank you.